God King, Chapter 10. The House of Talos. Nobody noticed them at all. People milled about, eyes on each other or on the ground. They never looked their way. Taharka was jostled by a young priest who then asked why he didn't look where he was going. After recovering from the shock of this, he began to wonder what was going to happen. "What now?" he asked. "Where do we go from here?" "I haven't had time to think," admitted Amos. "We can't go to my lodgings. I can't go to my lodgings. I'm the first one they'll look for." "Talos." Then he shook his head. "No, I brought him to you once. They will remember. They are very thorough." They looked at each other. For the first time, Amos seemed as much at a loss as the boy. Taharka looked around him. "Does it seem strange to you," he said, "how peaceful everything is?" It was true. A peaceful, drowsy night on the Nile. The stars above as bright as ever. Not that it was quiet. There was a constant hum of voices, even at this hour, broken sometimes by shouts and laughter. They had left the sacred precinct now and were in a world totally strange to Taharka, a world he had seen only rarely and always from high above on a litter or, when he was a child, from a chariot, a world of narrow streets and alleys, blank brick walls hiding who knew what within, little shops and stalls outside. Taharka's stomach had begun to gnaw. They stopped at a stall and bought onions and cucumbers between thick slabs of bread. "Never mind what's in it," said Amos. "You eat to live now, young hawk." Taharka tightened his lips, looking down at the taboo food. But he reminded himself he was the god. For now, the god would make his own rules. It wasn't forever, anyway. He resolutely bit into the bread. Nothing happened. The earth stayed still. Amos paid with some of the small change beans in his money bag. Taharka felt a sudden shock. Money! Never before this night had he thought of money. It had never even occurred to him. For the first time, he began to understand his plight. No, this was not a game. What was he going to do? Where, for example, would he sleep that night? The shocks of the evening had begun to tell on him. His whole body craved sleep. "We could find an inn," said Amos, "but better to save what we have. Who knows what I will find when I return to my lodgings, if I dare return at all. The homeless sometimes sleep down by the docks, and the soldiers turn their backs. It's safe enough. We'll go there." The homeless. Taharka, son of the sun, god king of Egypt and Cush, had become one of the homeless. He followed Amos to the docks, his feet dragging, hardly noticing where they went. And there, on the stones, the lapping of the Nile in his ears, he slept. He woke to the sun and the blue eyes of Talos staring into his. He blinked, shook off the cover of sleep, and said the first thing that came into his head, "What are you doing here?" And then he thought, what was he, Taharka, doing here? Then he knew, and wanted only to sleep again. Amos had awakened at once, sprung to his feet, and reached for the knife at his belt. He let it go when he saw who it was. "Yes," said Talos. "I thought this might be it." He was munching on a piece of bread. He gave some to Amos and some to Taharka. "Soldiers came to my house before the sun was up. They told me nothing, just tramped around, smashing everything in sight. When they found nothing, they left." He swallowed the bread and wiped his fingers on his robe. "So," he said to Amos, "after they had gone, I went to your house to see if you knew what was happening. A good thing I went quietly. There they were, same thing again. I hid and waited while they went through your place, and I saw there was no sign of you. They didn't say much. I thought they looked frightened, and when everything was quiet, I began to think." He leaned toward them, tapping his forehead. "Now," I thought, "what do Amos and I have in common that would interest the temple guards?" and it came to me there was only one thing. It was you, Great One." "You mustn't call me that now," said Taharka. "My name is Haru." Talos nodded wisely. "I understand," he said. "We've had our uprisings, our murders of chiefs and kings. I thought of that. Then I thought, what if they were not looking for a thing, but a person? And if that person were a person never seen by humble eyes, where might it be safe for that person to go? To a crowded place, of course, a humble place. And so I came down here." He nodded triumphantly, looking very pleased with himself. "It would have been safer for you not to have come," said Amos somberly. Talos shook his head. "They're not interested in me. They were just taking no chances. With you, Amos, it is different. I would not go back to your lodgings if I were you. They will be back." He stood up, shaking the crumbs out of his robe. "You had better come with me." Before Amos could speak, Taharka shook his head. "Amos must do as he likes, but I will not have you in danger because of me." "He will be in more danger from me, Haru," said Amos. "Think, outside the great house, how many have ever seen your face? Even when they carried you through the streets, they never saw you. Their eyes were on the ground." "Where I'm staying," said Talos, "they're not concerned with what goes on in the great house. Their minds are on other things. They will think nothing of either of you." "Has there been any news from the great house? Any great outcry? The god is gone, we are all lost?" "Nothing at all," said Talos. "I went to the precinct before I came here. Everything goes on as usual." Taharka felt chilled. Hardly anyone, he realized, even knew he was gone. The power of the high priest of Ammon was very great. And Shepnu, had they shut her away where she could not speak? And he was not there to help her. "They will kill you," she had said. "And then what good will you be?" "None whatsoever." "Come with me," said Talos. "After all, you have no other choice." The house of the Corinthian trader was in a sort of suburb beyond the city, where skilled workmen lived and foreigners sometimes stayed. It seemed incredibly small to Taharka, but it was a comfortable enough little house of whitewashed brick with a red wooden door and a floor of earth. In the entry court, a goat and a donkey were tied, and a woman, a servant provided with the house, was grinding the wheat for the bread. There were 3 rooms, a little storeroom, and a kitchen with a hearth and oven. After all, thought Taharka, looking around him, what more did a man really need? Right now it was in a state of chaos, littered with fragments of vases, figurines, and pottery smashed by the soldiers in their grim search. Talos ignored this for the moment and showed them to one of the 2 smaller rooms. "This is yours," he said. "Do what you like with it." He called to the servant woman to bring them some of the goat's milk. Taharka was somehow shamed by the man's kindness. "You are good to take us in," he said. "It won't be for long." And to Amos, "We'll find a messenger. Talos must know someone he can trust. I'll send to the great house. Let my friends know I'm safe. Tell them to send to Napata." "No," said Amos, and at Taharka's startled look, "They may have spies, even in Kush. We must wait for the army." And he added softly, "I think it will not be long." "How long?" said Taharka. "I cannot live as a beggar." "As to that," said Talos, "as you say, nothing is forever. When my lord is back in the great house, then he can reward me." "Nevertheless," said Amos, "we will pay our way." Talos was curious. How? "For a start, this," said Amos. He laid his money bag, the rings and the beans, on the table. He noticed Talos was looking around at the litter the soldiers had left, shaking his head in despair. "We'll help," said Amos, and the 3 of them set to work to clean up the room. Taharka had truly become Haru.